clean it again. Vivian Hale's voice cut through the charity dinner just as the string quartet stopped playing. 300 guests turned towards Sarah Miller, who was kneeling beside the head table with a white cloth in her hand. There was no stain on the marble. Vivian tipped her champagne glass anyway. A pale gold stream ran across the floor and touched the toe of Sarah's worn black shoe. "Now there is," Vivian said. "Perhaps this time you'll do the job we pay you for." A few guests looked away. One man laughed into his napkin. Sarah felt the old heat of humiliation rise into her face, but she did not lower her eyes. She thought of her 12-year-old son Jacob, asleep at their kitchen table because he had waited up for her again. She thought of the overdue electric bill folded beside his spelling book. Then she looked at the man seated to Vivian's right. Caleb Hale, chief executive of Hale Industries, had stopped reaching for his water. He was 48, silver beginning at his temples, and famous for making decisions before other people finished explaining the problem. Yet he said nothing while his mother smiled at Sarah. That silence hurt more than the laughter. Sarah wiped the champagne once. She folded the cloth into a neat square, stood and reached inside her apron. "Mrs. Hale," she said quietly, "the floor was clean before you poured your drink." Vivian's smile vanished. "Excuse me? And I didn't come here tonight to argue about marble." Sarah placed an old photograph in front of Caleb. The room seemed to shrink around it. In the picture, a much younger Edward Hale stood outside St. Matthew's Hospital. His unmistakable smile was turned toward a tired woman holding a newborn girl. Edward's arms circled them both. On his finger was the heavy silver ring Caleb now wore. Caleb picked up the photograph by its edges. His father had been dead for 27 years. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "The woman was my mother, Grace Miller. The baby was me." Vivian rose so quickly that her chair struck the wall. "It's a cheap fake." "Turn it over," Sarah said. Caleb did. The handwriting on the back made his breath catch. He had seen it on birthday cards, old contracts, and the final note his father left before the crash. "My daughter Sarah, April 14, 1983. Caleb will know her one day. A family divided by fear is still a family." Below the words was Edward Hale's signature. Caleb stared at Sarah. They had the same gray eyes. He had passed her in hotel corridors for 6 months without once asking her name. For one stunned moment, Caleb saw not a stranger but the shape of Edward's cheek, the small crease between their brows, and a question his father had carried into the grave. He hated how late recognition had come. Vivian reached for the picture, but Caleb pulled it away. "Sit down, Mother. You're embarrassing yourself." "No," Sarah said. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "You were counting on me being too embarrassed to speak." The guests were silent now. Near the ballroom doors, Caleb's 13-year-old daughter, Emma, watched with both hands wrapped around the sleeves of her black dress. Since her mother's death, she avoided crowds and spoke only when necessary. But her eyes never left Sarah. Caleb lowered his voice. "What do you want?" Sarah flinched, and he knew at once he had asked the wrong question. "My mother died 11 days ago," she said. "She spent 39 years waiting for your father's family to admit I existed. I don't want your house, your company, or your money. I want the truth said where a lie was told." Vivian's face turned white. Sarah removed a bundle of yellow envelopes from her apron. Each was addressed to Edward or Caleb Hale. Each had been returned unopened. "My mother sent 31 letters," Sarah said. 30 came back without a signature. She placed the last envelope beside the photograph. Across its front, in blue ink, someone had written, "Do not contact my son again." Caleb knew that handwriting too. It belonged to Vivian. Caleb ended the dinner before dessert. 20 minutes later, he sat across from Sarah in his office while Vivian stood at the window, making angry calls she pretended were about the guests. Sarah kept her cleaning cart beside her chair. It looked painfully small against the shelves of awards. "Start at the beginning," Caleb said. "My mother met Edward in 1981. She was a nurse at the factory clinic. He told her your parents had separated." "They had," Vivian said. "For 6 irresponsible weeks." Sarah ignored her. "When Mom became pregnant, he promised to provide for us. Then he died. After the funeral she wrote to you. The letters came back. Caleb examined the photograph under his desk lamp. A tiny crease crossed his father's face. He remembered Edward teaching him to tie a necktie, then disappearing behind meetings and locked doors. Love had always arrived in hurried pieces. A photograph can be altered, he said. Then test it. Test me. Sarah leaned forward. But don't call my mother a liar because the truth is inconvenient. Vivian finally turned. I will pay your rent for a year if you leave tonight and never return. Sarah's mouth tightened. You know my rent? That question silenced the room. Caleb looked at his mother. How would you know where she lives? Human Resources keeps records. You don't read housekeepers' records. Vivian glanced toward the door. Her application mentioned Grace. I recognized the name. Sarah produced her marked hiring form. I applied here on purpose, Sarah said. Mom asked me not to while she was alive. She was afraid you would hurt Jacob or cost me every job in the city. After she died, I needed to know whether fear had been right all along. Caleb studied the red mark. Who approved your placement in the ballroom? Your mother's office, Sarah replied. I was hired for laundry. 3 days later they moved me upstairs. Vivian's silence changed the question. Sarah had not wandered into the family's path. She had been kept close, watched, and given work that placed her beneath Vivian's eyes. Before Vivian could answer, glass shattered in the hallway. Emma stood outside the office, staring at a broken tumbler near her feet. Her breathing came fast. The raised voices and crowded ballroom had pushed her toward another panic attack. Caleb moved toward her, but Emma backed into the wall. Sarah approached slowly. She did not touch the girl. She took a fresh cloth from her cart, sat on the carpet, and began gathering the glass one piece at a time. My Jacob breaks things when adults shout too, Sarah said. Last month it was our only soup bowl. Emma's eyes moved toward her. Was he scared? It was the first sentence Caleb had heard his daughter speak all evening. Very. So we ate from coffee mugs and decided soup tasted better that way. Emma's breathing slowed. Sarah wrapped the glass securely, then held out her hand without moving closer. After a moment, Emma took it. Caleb felt something inside him loosen and ache. Vivian picked up her purse. This performance has gone far enough. It isn't a performance, Caleb said. At 9 tomorrow we'll take a DNA test. Tonight, I want every employment record connected to Sarah locked from alteration. Sarah stood. I work the morning shift. Not tomorrow. I can't afford to lose a day. Caleb reached for his wallet, then stopped when he saw her expression. You'll be paid. This is company business. For the first time, Sarah gave him a small nod of respect. Vivian left without saying goodbye. Emma remained beside Sarah. Caleb slid the photograph back into its cracked paper frame. Something resisted. He loosened one corner and found a narrow strip of hospital stationery hidden behind the picture. On it, Edward had written 3 words and a number. Ask Marcus Reed. 214. Caleb knew the name. Marcus had been his father's attorney, but he had vanished after Edward's death. Sarah touched the number. 214 was my mother's hospital room. No, Caleb said, remembering a sealed door in the old Hale archive. It was also my father's private file. Behind them, Emma whispered, Grandmother has the key. By sunrise, Sarah's employee badge no longer opened the hotel service entrance. She tried it twice before the security guard lowered his eyes. Mrs. Hale suspended you. The CEO ordered my records protected. I'm sorry, Sarah. Her lunchbox was waiting on the sidewalk. Inside lay Jacob's peanut butter sandwich, the apple he had polished for her, and a white envelope containing $10,000. Sarah walked straight into the lobby and emptied the money across the marble desk. Please tell Mrs. Hale, she said as guests turned to look, that my silence is not for sale. Caleb arrived in time to hear her. He looked at the scattered bills, then at the guard. Restore her badge. I don't want it restored, Sarah said. Not if your mother can take it whenever I disobey her. That answer surprised him. Most people near Caleb fought to stay close to power. Sarah was willing to walk away from it. Then come with me, he said. We'll find Marcus Reed. Marcus lived above a closed hardware store 40 miles outside the city. He was 81 and answered the door holding an oxygen tube beneath his nose. When Caleb introduced Sarah, the old man gripped the doorframe. "Grace's girl?" he murmured. "You have Edward's eyes." Sarah did not smile. "My mother waited for you." Marcus let them in. His apartment smelled of dust and peppermint. On the table sat a locked metal box marked 214. Marcus explained that Edward had created a trust for Sarah before the plane crash. It included Hale shares and every dividend earned from them. Vivian challenged the document, claiming Edward was confused by medication. Marcus had promised to testify. "Then why didn't you?" Caleb asked. Marcus looked toward a photograph of his own family. "My daughter was 19. Vivian showed me proof that Edward had used company money to fund the trust. She said she would report me as part of the fraud and destroy my daughter's future. I told myself I was protecting my child." "You protected yours by abandoning mine," Sarah said. Marcus bowed his head. "Yes." He unlocked the box. Inside were copies of the trust, a hospital bracelet bearing Sarah's birth name, and a small cassette labeled for Caleb. Caleb reached for it, but Marcus covered the box with both hands. "There is more." When Hale Industries nearly collapsed in 2009, Vivian borrowed against Sarah's shares. The money saved thousands of jobs. She has been replacing it for years. Replacing how much? Not enough. Caleb stared at the floor. His mother had hidden a sister and built the company's recovery on her stolen inheritance. Yet that money had kept factories open. The truth already had innocent people tied to it. Sarah lifted the hospital bracelet. Grace Miller had kept its matching half in her sewing box. As a child, Sarah used to trace the faded letters and ask why it said Hale instead of Miller. Grace always answered, "Because one name tells where you came from. The other tells who stayed." Sarah placed the bracelet back. "I still don't want the money," she said. "But I won't let her decide what my mother's pain was worth." Marcus handed her the key. "Then you should open the archive yourself." Caleb's phone rang. The private laboratory could return the DNA result by evening. He approved the fee, then noticed 6 missed calls from his board. Vivian had told the directors that an employee was blackmailing the family with forged evidence. Trading in Hale stock had been halted pending an internal review. Outside, reporters surrounded Caleb's car. Sarah's phone vibrated next. Jacob's school principal sounded frightened. 2 television crews were waiting at the school gate, asking children whether Jacob's mother was a thief. Sarah closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she took the cassette. Caleb called the principal himself. He did not mention his title. He asked that Jacob wait somewhere private, promised no child would face the cameras alone, and apologized for a family that had made a school hallway unsafe. Sarah listened, surprised by the humility in his voice. Trust had not arrived, but for the first time it had somewhere to begin. For once she did not stand alone. "I have to get my son." Caleb opened the car door for her. "We'll get him together." As they pulled away, Marcus called after them. "Caleb, the recording is not your father's confession." Caleb lowered the window. The old attorney's face had gone gray. "It is Vivian's." Sarah found Jacob hiding in the school library between 2 shelves of biographies. He was small for 12, with his mother's steady eyes and a red mark where he had been gripping his wrist. "Did you steal from those people?" he asked. Sarah knelt. "No." "Are we rich now?" "No," she almost laughed, but tears came instead. "We are exactly who we were yesterday." Jacob pulled a bruised apple from his backpack. "I saved this because you forgot lunch." Caleb turned away so the boy would not see his face. They returned to the hotel through the loading dock to avoid reporters. In the old archive, Emma was waiting with the brass key she had taken from Vivian's desk. Caleb should have scolded her. Instead, he saw how tightly she held it. "You knew about file 214? He asked. Emma shook her head. "Grandmother keeps the key under Mom's picture. She said family secrets belong with dead people." Sarah crouched beside her. "Secrets don't stay with the dead. They sit on the living until someone can't breathe." Emma placed the key in Sarah's palm. File 214 contained no papers. It held an old cassette player. Caleb inserted Marcus's tape. Static filled the small room, followed by Vivian's younger voice. Edward, you cannot put that child in the trust. If the board learns you used company funds, they will remove you. Caleb will lose everything. Edward answered, then I will repay it. Sarah is my daughter. And I am your wife. We have not been husband and wife for years. The recording clicked, but Vivian continued. If you acknowledge her, I will take Caleb overseas. You will never see your son again. Caleb's hands went numb. Edward's final words were quiet. One day he will know what you made me choose. The tape ended. No one moved. Emma reached for her father. Jacob reached for his mother. Two wounded families stood together under the weight of an old fear. Then Caleb's phone chimed. The DNA report showed a 99.98% probability that he and Sarah shared a father. He looked at the woman still wearing a maid's uniform because his mother had left her belongings on a sidewalk. Sarah, he said, and his voice broke. You're my sister. In every version, music rose, pain disappeared, and she finally knew where she belonged. Instead, she remembered Grace coughing through her last night, apologizing for leaving Sarah alone. I was your sister yesterday, Sarah said. You just know it today. Caleb nodded. He did not ask for forgiveness. He opened his arms and waited. Sarah stepped into them. The hug lasted only seconds, but Emma began to cry. Jacob slipped his hand into hers. For the first time since the photograph touched the table, Sarah felt her mother's hope instead of her grief. The archive door opened. Vivian stood there with 3 board members and hotel security. I see you stole my key, she said to Emma. Caleb moved in front of his daughter. We heard the tape. Vivian's eyes passed over the children. Her anger softened for an instant, then hardened again. Edward was going to destroy this family over an affair. I stopped him. You stole from Sarah. I saved the company. In 2009, banks refused us. Her trust kept 8 plants open and 9,000 people employed. Sarah held up the bracelet. Did those workers know the money came from a baby you erased? Vivian looked at her fully for the first time. Your mother could have exposed us. She accepted the arrangement. She accepted poverty because you threatened to call her a homewrecker in every newspaper. I read your letters. One director cleared his throat. The board had voted to place Caleb on temporary leave. Vivian would serve as acting CEO until the scandal was contained. If Caleb publicly supported Sarah's claim, lenders could cancel a crucial credit agreement. Payroll was 11 days away. Caleb removed his company badge and put it on the empty shelf. Then you can have my office, he told Vivian. You cannot have my sister. Vivian stared at the badge. For the first time, certainty left her face. Sarah understood what Caleb had surrendered. She also understood what thousands of workers might lose if the company failed. Put him back, she said. I'll sign away the shares. Caleb turned. No. My mother wanted me acknowledged, not obeyed. I won't buy a family with other families' paychecks. Vivian reached into her purse and produced a prepared release, as if she had known Sarah's heart better than anyone. Sarah took the pen. Before she could sign, Emma stepped between them. She looked at her grandmother, trembling from head to foot. If this is what being a Hale means, she whispered, I don't want the name. Vivian's prepared release remained unsigned. By noon, Caleb's office belonged to his mother, Sarah's face was on every local channel, and the hotel had issued a statement calling her claims a painful misunderstanding. Vivian did not call Sarah a liar. She used softer words that did the same work. Caleb took Sarah, Jacob, and Emma out through the kitchen. A dishwasher named Louise pressed a paper bag into Sarah's hands. Inside were 4 sandwiches and a note signed by 23 hotel workers. We saw what she did. You were never invisible to us. Sarah read it twice before folding it beside the photograph. At her apartment, an eviction notice waited under the door. The building was owned by a Hale subsidiary. Jacob tried to hide the paper, but Sarah saw it. We can stay with me, Caleb said. And wake up beneath 20 cameras? Sarah asked. No. Then let me pay for a hotel. I need a brother, Caleb. Not an owner. The word stopped him. He took out his phone, canceled the car waiting downstairs, and sat at Sarah's small kitchen table. One leg wobbled. Jacob folded a grocery receipt beneath it, and Caleb helped him until the table stood straight. That evening they ate Louise's sandwiches from mismatched plates. Emma stared at a photograph of Grace on the refrigerator. "She looks like you," Emma told Sarah. "She was braver." "No," Jacob said. "Mom is scared all the time. She just does things anyway." Caleb smiled. Sarah did too. For 10 quiet minutes they were not a scandal. They were 4 people sharing mustard and the truth. Nobody now asked Sarah to prove she had earned a place at their table. Then someone pounded on the door. 2 hotel security officers stood outside with a detective. Edward Hale's silver signet ring had disappeared from the archive. Camera footage showed Jacob entering the room. "He was with us," Sarah said. "We still need to search his bag." Jacob handed it over. The detective opened the front pocket and removed the ring. The boy's face emptied. "I didn't put that there." Sarah pulled him against her. Caleb called the company's attorney, but the man now reported to Vivian. The detective explained that no arrest would be made if the owner declined charges. Vivian would do that only if Sarah came to the board meeting the next morning. "She framed a child," Caleb said. Emma stood behind him, silent and pale. At 9, Sarah entered the boardroom with Jacob's hand in hers. Vivian sat at the head of the table. A new release lay before Sarah. This one surrendered all inheritance rights, admitted the photograph was unverified, and prohibited her from discussing the family. "Sign it," Vivian said, "and the ring was a misunderstanding. Jacob returns to school. Your apartment is yours for 5 years. Caleb returns as CEO. And if I refuse? Your son enters the system as a thief." Caleb's resignation becomes permanent. When the lenders leave, workers will blame the woman who wanted a fortune more than they wanted food. Sarah looked at Caleb. He seemed older than he had 2 days earlier. "Tell me what to do," she whispered. "I can't." He took her hand. "No one gets to choose for you again." Sarah thought of Grace counting coins at the pharmacy. She thought of Jacob sleeping in his coat when the heat was shut off. She thought of thousands of lunchboxes packed before dawn by people who would never enter this room. She picked up the pen. Jacob touched her sleeve. "Don't say Mom lied." The family name he used for Grace broke something open inside Sarah. She set the pen down and began to cry, not politely, not quietly, but with 39 years of swallowed shame. Jacob hugged her. Nobody at the table moved. Caleb removed the CEO pin from his lapel. "My resignation is effective now," he said. "Release the workers from your threat. I'll defend my nephew myself." Vivian's fingers tightened around the table. "You would throw away your father's company for people you met yesterday?" Caleb placed the pin beside the release. "They were my family yesterday. I was simply late." One director lowered her eyes. Another pushed his chair away from Vivian. Sarah wiped her face. She tore the release once, then again. The sound was small, but it changed the room. Vivian signaled to the detective. "Proceed with the complaint." The detective stepped toward Jacob. "Wait." Emma stood near the door. Her hands shook so hard that her fingernails clicked against her phone. Caleb moved toward her, but she raised one palm. All year, adults had finished her sentences, excused her silence, and decided which truths she was too fragile to carry. This one belonged to her. She looked directly at the detective. "Jacob didn't steal the ring," she said. Her voice cracked, then grew stronger. "I saw grandmother put it in his backpack." Vivian rose. "Emma, you're confused." Emma unlocked her phone and placed it on the table. "I knew you would say that," she replied. "So I recorded you." On Emma's recording, Vivian's bracelet chimed against the zipper of Jacob's backpack. Then came her whisper to the head of security, "The boy gives us leverage. No police unless Sarah refuses." Nobody spoke when the audio ended. The detective picked up the ring with a gloved hand. "Mrs. Hale, you should call your attorney." Vivian looked at Emma as if the child had struck her. Emma began to fold inward, but Sarah crossed the room and stood beside her. "You told the truth," Sarah said. "What happens next belongs to the adults." The detective dismissed Jacob and opened an investigation into the planted evidence. The board's lead director, Helen Brooks, ordered Vivian's company access suspended. In the hallway, Jacob thanked Emma by offering her his polished apple. She accepted it with both hands. "I was scared," she admitted. "That's when it counts," he said, repeating his lesson about Sarah. Caleb heard them and closed his eyes. By afternoon, Marcus Reed had delivered the original trust documents. Helen brought in an independent accountant. They found that Vivian had borrowed $46 million against Sarah's shares, then concealed the debt through a charitable foundation. She had repaid $31 million. The missing balance was serious, but it would not close the factories. The trust contained a clause Edward had insisted upon. If the shares were ever used to support Hale Industries, employee pensions and wages had to be paid before family dividends. Vivian had hidden that clause from both the banks and the board. "She invented the choice," Sarah said. "It was never me or the workers." "It was control," Caleb answered. "She made every road lead through her." Helen scheduled an emergency shareholder meeting for Friday. Sarah could demand immediate repayment, force the sale of company assets, and seek criminal charges for the trust fraud. Vivian would be removed regardless, but Sarah's decision could determine whether she left with dignity or in handcuffs. That evening, Sarah packed their apartment. The eviction was now illegal, yet she could no longer bear the Hale logo stamped on the notice. Caleb wrapped dishes in newspaper while Jacob and Emma labeled boxes. "There are people I can hire for this," Caleb said, struggling with a roll of tape. Sarah took it from him. "I know. But you need to learn that helping is sometimes boring." He laughed, a sound Emma had almost forgotten. A knock came at the open door. Vivian stood alone. Without her tailored jacket, she looked smaller. Sarah nearly closed the door, but Emma was watching. "5 minutes," Sarah said. Vivian entered the kitchen but did not sit. From her purse she removed a second photograph. Grace and Vivian were together in a hospital garden. Each held a baby. Caleb slept against Grace's shoulder. Sarah slept against Vivian's. "Your mother saved Caleb's life," Vivian said. "He stopped breathing after surgery." Grace noticed before the doctor did. Caleb stared at the picture. "You knew her." "I liked her." The admission seemed to cost Vivian more than any financial confession. Then Edward chose her, and every kindness felt like theft. Sarah studied the young women in the image. They had not yet learned what fear could make them do. "Why keep this?" "To remember that I wasn't always the person you met." Vivian said Edward had humiliated her for years, promising reconciliation while building another life. When she learned about Sarah, she imagined losing her son, her home, and the company her own father had helped finance. She threatened Edward. After he died, each lie required another. By 2009, she could save the company only by touching the money she had hidden. "And Jacob?" Sarah asked. Vivian looked toward him. "There is no explanation that deserves to stand beside what I did. That is the first honest thing you've said." Vivian placed the photograph on the table. "What will you do Friday?" Sarah could see the fear beneath her pride. She felt no pleasure in it. "I want the trust restored. I want every worker protected. I want my mother's name cleared. And I want Jacob left out of your mouth forever. Will you send me to prison?" Sarah glanced at Emma, who loved her grandmother even now. Love did not erase harm. Harm did not erase love. That was the cruelest truth in the room. "Tomorrow," Sarah said, "you will stand before the shareholders and tell them everything. What happens after that will depend on whether you choose the truth when it costs you." Vivian picked up her coat. At the door, Emma spoke. "I still love you, Grandma." Vivian turned, hope flashing across her face. Emma did not move closer. But love is not the same as trust. The next morning, Vivian walked toward the shareholder podium with no speech in her hands. Vivian gripped the podium while cameras clicked. Sarah sat between Caleb and Jacob. Emma occupied the chair on Caleb's other side, her phone resting openly before her. "For 27 years, Vivian began, I protected Hale Industries from a false claim." Sarah felt Caleb stiffen. Vivian looked down at the first photograph displayed on the screen. Edward, Grace, and baby Sarah outside St. Matthew's Hospital. That is what I told myself, she continued. It was easier than admitting I protected myself. A murmur traveled through the room. Vivian confessed that Sarah was Edward's daughter, that she had intercepted Grace's letters, suppressed the trust, borrowed its assets, and planted the ring in Jacob's bag. She did not blame Edward, the recession, or fear. When she finished, she stepped away from the podium. Helen invited Sarah forward. Sarah's old black work shoes made almost no sound on the carpet. She wore the same simple dress she had worn to Grace's funeral. At the microphone, she could see hotel cleaners gathered near the back. Louise lifted one hand. My mother did not spend her life waiting for a fortune, Sarah said. She waited for one sentence: you were telling the truth. She placed Grace's half of the hospital bracelet beside the microphone. Caleb added the half from file 214. The two pieces formed one band. I will not force the sale of a factory or take $1 from a worker's pension. The trust will accept repayment from Vivian's family holdings over 5 years. Its voting shares will remain in Hale Industries under 3 conditions. Sarah faced the board. First, every employee receives independent protection against retaliation. Second, the stolen dividends fund education, housing assistance, and legal support for hourly workers. Third, no Hale family member controls the trust alone. Not me, not Caleb, and not our children. She also asked that Grace's clinic be reopened in the oldest factory and that its doors serve every worker, insured or not. The room had expected a demand for luxury. Sarah offered a nurse, a lawyer, and a safe bed instead. At the back, Luis pressed both hands over his face. This time, power listened. One shareholder asked whether she was surrendering her inheritance. No, Sarah said. I am deciding what I inherited it for. The vote was overwhelming. Vivian was removed as chair and barred from management. The board referred the planted evidence to prosecutors but supported a civil resolution on the trust fraud because she had confessed, returned assets, and agreed to cooperate. The detective made clear that Jacob's case would be sealed and expunged. Then Helen asked Caleb to resume his role as CEO. He stood but did not walk to the podium. I ignored disrespect because confronting my mother was inconvenient, he said. A better title will not make me a better man. Put my return to an employee vote of confidence, and appoint Sarah to lead the trust transition with full authority. The cleaners at the back began to clap. The sound spread until the room rose. Caleb turned to Sarah. If you want the job, I have conditions. He almost smiled. Of course you do. No private elevator. No special dining room. And every executive works one service shift each year. Including the CEO? Especially the CEO. Jacob laughed first. Emma joined him. Vivian remained near the wall without a chair or an assistant. As security prepared to escort her out, Sarah approached. I cannot forgive you today, Sarah said. Vivian nodded once. But if you spend the rest of your life repairing what you broke, today does not have to be your final chapter. Vivian's composure collapsed. She covered her mouth and wept. Sarah did not hug her. Mercy, she understood, was not pretending a wound had closed. She simply stepped aside and allowed Vivian to leave with the truth. Caleb came to Sarah carrying the framed photograph. Where should this go? Sarah looked at the marble lobby beyond the doors, where she had once knelt before people who never learned her name. Not in the family gallery, she said. Put it by the employee entrance. Beneath it they placed a small brass plaque. Grace Miller told the truth. 1 year later, Caleb reported for his first hotel cleaning shift at 6 a.m. Sarah handed him a cart, a gray uniform, and the same folded cloth she had carried at the charity dinner. The lobby already looks clean, he said. Sarah pointed to a faint mark near the revolving door. Clean it again. Caleb stared at her. Then Sarah laughed, and he laughed with her until Luis came from the kitchen to see what was wrong. Nothing was wrong. The Hale Grace Trust now paid night school tuition for 600 employees. Its emergency housing fund had kept 82 families from eviction. Every complaint went to an independent office, and the first executive dismissed for humiliating a dishwasher learned that the rules were not decoration. Sarah worked from a modest office beside the staff cafeteria. She still packed lunch in Jacob's box. Inside the lid he had taped a note, "You were brave while scared." Jacob had stopped hiding his last name at school. He and Emma met every Wednesday to do homework, although more talking than homework happened. Emma had joined the debate team. Her first speech was about how silence can look peaceful while protecting harm. Caleb attended every debate, even when investor meetings ran late. He kept a photograph of Emma at the podium beside his computer and no longer treated presence as something he could schedule for later. Vivian lived in a 2-bedroom apartment and spent 3 mornings each week reviewing old employee claims with independent auditors. The civil agreement required repayment and service. It did not require apology letters, but she wrote them anyway. Grace's letter took her 6 months. Sarah found it beneath the photograph by the employee entrance. "Grace, I made your patience serve my pride. You saved my son and I punished your daughter. I cannot ask you to forgive what I refused to repair while you were alive. I can only tell the truth now, every day I have left." She felt grief, anger, and something gentler moving between them. The family gathered at Sarah's apartment for dinner. Caleb burned the rolls. Jacob served soup in coffee mugs and explained that it tasted better that way. Emma set one extra place. When the doorbell rang, Vivian stood outside holding Grace's favorite lemon cake from a recipe Sarah had once mentioned. "I can leave it," Vivian said. Sarah looked at the woman who had stolen years that no apology could return. Then she looked at Emma, trying not to hope. "You may stay for dinner," Sarah said. "That is not forgiveness. It is dinner." Vivian nodded. "I understand." She sat in the extra chair, not at the head of the table. Nobody made a speech. Caleb passed the soup. Jacob complained about algebra. Emma asked Sarah whether Grace would have let Vivian in. Sarah considered the question. "Your grandmother Grace believed a locked door could keep out danger," she said, "but it could also keep out change. She would have opened it carefully." After dinner they took a new photograph. Caleb set the camera timer and hurried into place. Sarah stood beside him. Jacob and Emma leaned together in front. Vivian remained at the edge until Sarah moved half a step and made room, not enough to erase the distance, but enough to show that distance could change. The new picture was hung beside the old one at the employee entrance. Visitors often stopped there. Some believed Sarah had been too merciful. Others believed Vivian's confession deserved a path back. Sarah never told them which answer was correct. She had learned that justice and mercy were not opposite doors. Sometimes justice locked away the power to harm, while mercy left one chair open for the person willing to change. The most important part of the display was not Edward's signature, the restored bracelet, or even the Hale name. It was the small space between 2 photographs, one showing a family divided by fear, the other showing people still learning how to become one. Every morning Sarah passed those pictures before work. She touched Grace's name on the plaque, lifted her head, and walked through the door no one could close again.